Hey, give me some bottled water, man.
Go.
Thanks.
My name's Chris Atkinson, and today's date is November 24th, 2009. I'm interviewing James Hendricks at Ball State University about his experiences in the military during the Vietnam War era. How you doing, Dr. Hendricks?
Just fine, thank you.
I like to start at the beginning. Where were you born?
Galesburg, Illinois.
What was growing up in Galesburg like?
It was a factory town of about 35,000. We lived on a small farm about 5 or 6 miles north of Galesburg. So I was raised on a farm. I would say my family was conservative, very religious. You went to church every Sunday. It was a pretty much what you'd expect in the 50s, the picket fence and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Did you know anybody when you were young that was in the military, or what was your first experience with the military? What do you remember?
I don't remember. Well, first of all, my uncle was in the military, but we didn't have much contact with him. As far as I know, there is no other relative in my family history, and I've gone back a couple hundred years, that was in the military. I don't know what he did in the military. He died at a very young age, so I didn't get a chance to talk to him about much of anything. So,
are you still conservative today?
Am I conservative?
Yeah. Did you follow in your parents' footsteps?
I'm a political and fiscal conservative, and very much a social liberal.
What would your parents have said about being a social liberal today?
Well, I don't know. My father-in-law wants to argue with me about it, but I'm not into arguing about it. He's definitely not a social liberal. He's way over there. So.
Okay, and let's move it up to high school.
Sure.
What was high school like?
Oh, I went out for sports, wrestling and that, and then got in a car wreck. That ended my wrestling career. And then I decided I wanted to buy a car, so I had to go to work. And so I bought my dad's car so he could buy another one. And then when I got older, I started working in the factories. There were 5 factories in a town of 35,000. That's a lot of factories. These are big factories. So that was the place where you could make some good money.
And did you?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
You weren't expected to work on the farm?
Well, no. My dad wanted to do his stuff by himself.
What kind of factory did you work in?
I worked in 5 of them.
All 5 in town, huh?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. Lawn boy lawnmowers. The I-beams underneath bridges, those big I-beams. Butler bends. Gates tires and rubber hoses. Alton boxes, and Admiral refrigerators.
This is jumping ahead just a little bit, but was working in a factory anything like the organizational structure in the military? Were these unionized factories? What?
Yes, they were all unionized. I had to join the union. I wasn't into joining the union, but I joined the union. I'm not a union guy.
You are? Or you're
no, I'm not.
Just out of curiosity, why aren't you a union guy?
Well, I don't think they do much for you, and people that belong to the union, the first thing they want is a higher salary, and it's kind of like here at Ball State. Some people want to join a union, and they just want a higher salary. Well, this is a state university. It's operated by a budget from the state, so I don't think they do a whole lot for you.
So how'd you get to the from factory work to the military? What transition happened?
Well, I was in high school, and you know, you were just kind of sitting around trying to figure out what you were going to do with your life, and I didn't know what I was going to do. My dad said, well, you ought to go to college. There was a college in town, but I don't think I would have done well there. It was a private school. And so I said I wanted to go to, there was a place called Western Illinois University, and it was about 35 miles away. So I went down there, and I'd already started what might be considered to be a pool shooting career. I played pool 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so when I got down to Western, I played pool 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as you may imagine, that doesn't work out very well for grades. So I flunked out of college, and then went back to work in the factories. Then said, well, you know, I think I better check out that school thing again. See if I do better. And so then I went to Blackhawk, which was up in the Quad Cities, about 35 miles away. And did a little bit better. Had a professor who sparked my interest in psychology. And then there was this thing called Vietnam. And then there was this thing called the draft. And, you know, you hear these words, but they don't mean a whole lot to you. Because, you know, right now we're talking about 1965. Yeah, 1965. I was still in school. And people are talking about these things, but it doesn't seem like it's impacting you at all. It's like, you know, Vietnam is 10,000 miles away, the draft, whatever. I'm in school, I'm not that concerned. And then when I had to quit school because I ran out of money, and so I went back to work in the factory. Well, that's the second time that I was out of school. I lost my student deferment, and of course I kind of went, well, I guess that must mean something. I'm not sure. You know, this seems very silly right now. You know, like, I must have been pretty slow, you know what I mean, to not understand what was going on. But I was raised on a farm in a small town, and not a big town, and we didn't know much about what was going on. And many people have trouble understanding that in 1965 we really didn't know that much. So when I lost my student deferment, I was reclassified 1A, which made me eligible for the draft. And so, spring of '66, my dad said to me, you know, son, it seems to me like you don't have much direction in your life. And I think that it would be a good thing for you to do, to go in the military. I think it would really be a really good thing. Now, of course, he hadn't been in the military, so, you know, it was good advice, but it wasn't what you'd call advice that had some, he was educated advice. So I don't know how all it happened, but I just remember reading in the newspaper about something about Vietnam, and then reading about people dying in Vietnam, and of course I think most of them were in the Army, but what would I know, you know, whether they were in the Army or not? I mean, you don't think about those things. And so he said, yeah, he said, you know, if I were you, he said, I'd enlist in the Navy. That way you don't have to go to the Army. And I remember him saying 3 hots and a cot, which meant you got 3 good meals a day and you got a nice place to sleep, as opposed to the Army, where I guess you're laying on the ground or something. You really don't think these things through very well. So I went down to the recruiting office, and all of them were there. You know, I saw the Marine Corps guy outside in the Air Force picture, and took a look at the Marine Corps picture and said, well, that doesn't look like me. And the Air Force, I'm thinking, well, I don't really understand what they do. I think they fly planes, I guess. And then the Army, I just thought, well, you know, they're in Vietnam. Not thinking, of course, everybody else is in Vietnam too. And so I said, well, you know, that Navy thing, maybe that's the deal. So I went over to the Navy guy, and I enlisted in the Navy, and then I think something about 120 days that you'd go away, do your thing. So I enlisted for 4 years in the Navy.
Now, you mentioned that you did hear some news stories prior to enlisting. They didn't really register. Can you talk in a little bit more
I don't think they
detail?
registered with much of anybody. You know, you'd see things on TV about Vietnam, but, you know, let's understand that in 1965, well, the Vietnam War actually started in 1945, but a lot of people want to disagree with that. But it started in 1945 when Ho Chi Minh asked Harry Truman 6 times, you know, we want to be left alone. We want, you know, we don't want the French to come back. And, of course, Harry Truman said, well, you know, the French are our buddies, forget it. So then the French went back in, and, of course, we had the French War. And then when they were defeated at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, we were supporting the French, and then we started sending, quote, advisors to Vietnam, if that's what you want to call them. I'm not sure all of them were advisors. Some of them might have been mercenaries. And so then when Kennedy went into office, he started sending in more advisors. So we were supporting anyone that would get rid of Ho Chi Minh. We didn't want him to be in charge of things there. So I understand all that now because of the historical reference to it. At the time, we didn't think much about anything other than, okay, Kennedy's sending in, 5,000 advisors to Vietnam. Gee, that's swell. I hope they advise them well. And then, a few years goes by, and Kennedy's sending more advisors in. And then you hear about, he's going to send in a few troops to secure Da Nang. And you go, well, that's good to secure Da Nang. Not thinking, of course, that this is all part of a build-up. But the general public was very ignorant, and I was very ignorant to what was going on. So I just said, hey, if I go in the Navy, I don't have to worry about Vietnam. That's my thing. I don't want to go there. So that's why I enlisted in the Navy.
In history class in high school, was Vietnam ever brought up?
No, I graduated in 1962. I don't think it was ever brought up. If it was, I probably didn't listen to it because I had a very low appreciation of history for a long time.
Why do you think, you mentioned that most Americans were naive kind of about what was going on, and you said that you'd read stories about soldiers being killed.
Yeah.
And did you ever in your mind associate that with this could happen to me if I joined the military, or where did you get your ideas about the military with it?
I don't think there was ever any connection. You know, it was like, that's somebody else. That's Joe that lives in Chicago, or Fred that lives in Los Angeles, and it's not anybody from Galesburg. Certainly not anybody from Galesburg that's in the military. None of those folks are being hurt or anything. Not realizing, of course, that there probably was somebody killed in Vietnam in 64 or 65 that was from Galesburg. We just didn't know it. It might have been in the paper, but you wouldn't pay much attention to it.
So it's 1966, and you're at the Navy office. How does that process go, and what are your thoughts at that time?
Well, I went down there and said I'd like to enlist in the Navy. And, of course, I'm sure they were very happy to see me, of course, as you might imagine. Here comes this, boy in who doesn't know much, very naive, raised on a farm. So I went in, enlisted in the Navy, and was sent to Great Lakes Naval Training Command for boot camp. And so I'm in boot camp, and it's really, for me, it's not a big deal because you know, I was raised with guns, so guns were not a big deal to me. I used to hunt all the time. The exercise was not a big deal to me because I was very physically fit, working on the farm, being a wrestler and that sort of thing. Taking orders and commands and that was no big deal to me because I was raised in a family where when your father's an elder or your father said something, that's just what you did. So this was not difficult for me. So boot camp was fine. I would say that if looking back on it, if you can appreciate how hilarious this is, how ridiculous this is, and how slow I was when they brought the book. They bring this book out to you, the Book of Jobs, and they said, "Here's the Book of Jobs, and you have to pick 3 of them." And I said, "Oh, okay." I was kind of wondering how this worked, you know. And so he said, I said, "Well, I want personnel man," because when I was in college, this guy talked about working with people and that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, well, psychology, right? Working with people. I want to be a personnel man. He said, "Okay, you put that down." So I put that down as number 1. I looked through the rest of the book and I said, "I don't see much anything else I want to be." He said, "Well, what about a weatherman?" And I'm thinking, well, I really don't want to be a weatherman, but okay, I'll put that down. He said, "Put that down as number 3." He says, now look through there real close and see if you see anything else you really... You know, you said that you wanted to work with people. Now, you see this fellow here, Corman? Well, he works with people. See that? And he helps people. And I thought, oh. So here's the really slow part. I mark down Corman. I look up at him and I say, "Do you think I might get one of my 3? And he says, "Oh, yeah." So a couple weeks goes by, and I got my second choice. I was just happy as could be. So I get on the train to go home before I'm getting ready to go to corps school. And I read in my hometown newspaper. My hometown newspaper was laying on the seat in this train from Chicago to Galesburg. And it said, and there was this fellow that I graduated from high school with. And it said, "Ronald Eunice, HM3/USN/USMC/FMF, killed in action in Vietnam." I went, Ronald Eunice. I remember Ron Eunice. HM3. Well, wait a minute. He was a corpsman. And I said, well, what was he doing in Vietnam? That's because they work in hospitals, you know what I mean? And then I said, it said USN. I'm thinking, well, that's the United States Navy. Well, what's this USMC thing? And what's FMF? And he was killed. Oh, well, you know, you say things like this, right, to minimize it. Well, you know, Ron was not the brightest bulb in the pack. I'm smarter than that. You know, you go through this whole routine, right, about how this would never happen to you. So got on the train, went back to getting ready to go into corps school. And so I'm walking into corps school, and as the folks who are graduating are walking out, and people are yelling at him, "Where are you going? Where are you going?" So the guy says, "Philadelphia." Another guy says, "Vietnam." Another, D.C., Vietnam. I'm going, what? It's like you're in the twilight zone because these people are saying Vietnam, and I'm going, I work in hospitals. That's what I'm going to be doing. So then we go down to this big room. It's big room filled with everybody. That's brand new. And up at the front of the room is a chief corpsman. And behind him is a captain in the Marine Corps. And I'm thinking to myself, something is amiss here. This Marine guy is not supposed to be. This is Navy. He's in the wrong. Must have got lost or something, you know. So anyway, the chief corpsman, he started talking to us about how we had such a great history, and that we're the only occupation in all military branches that can be detached, in effect transferred from one to the other, Well, the Marine Corps really isn't the other. The Marine Corps is part of the Navy, isn't it? It's part of the Naval Service. So anyway, he starts talking about how we've got, we are awarded more Purple Hearts than any other occupation per person, and I'm thinking, well, I don't want one of those. And he's talking about medals, and we get more than other people. And he said, but there's a downside to being a corpsman, and a lot of you guys are going to have to be careful that you get into illegal drugs, and then you get into drugs that you have access to. And then, of course, at that time there was a lot of homophobia, and he said that this occupation probably had more homosexuals than anybody else, and he just flat told us, if you're homosexual, you're going to be kicked out of the military. And I'm thinking, well, none of this applies to me, and I don't care, so whatever. All I want to know is what's this joker in the Marine Corps doing here, So then he says, now, some of you are going to be going to Vietnam. Now, I'm thinking to myself, the rest of the stuff he talked about, I go, whatever. But then when he says that we might be going to Vietnam, I'm going, this is serious. So I'm going, wow. And then he says, now this guy's going to explain it to you. I'm going, what's he going to explain? He's not supposed to be here. You know what I mean? It's like you're in the Twilight Zone. So he says, United States Marine Corps, hoorah and all. He went into all that stuff. And he says, we love our corpsmen, and da-da-da, and you ought to volunteer for Vietnam, and, you ought to volunteer for it. No, I don't think so. And he says, a lot of you are going to be going and all this and that. And so there's this, there's this game or this thing called Hidigo, H-D-I-G-O. How do I get out of this? So you wouldn't believe how many hands went up saying, what do I need to do to not go to Vietnam? That was it, man. Now some people didn't raise their hand because they're just sitting there they're just probably still in shock, or maybe someone wanted to go to Vietnam. I don't know. So they said, well, go to an advanced school. Okay. So then I started thinking to myself, I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack, but I want to find out the rules here. What are the rules? So they said that if you went to an advanced school, the chances are that you probably wouldn't have enough time to go to Vietnam. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do well. I'm going to go to an advanced school. You had to have 16 months left on in the 4 years. In order to be more than 16 months left, they could send you to Vietnam. If you got to 16 months, you weren't going to go. So I went to neuropsych school out at Bethesda in D.C. And then I worked there. Well, first of all, I worked on a surgical ward. Then I went to neuropsych school. And then I went back to Great Lakes and worked on psychiatric hospital wards. And then I think I had about 17 or 18 months left. And I'm thinking, hey man, gonna breeze that 16-month deal, looking good, And I got the letter. And, it was from he didn't sign it, but the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Dear HM3 Hendricks, I don't know, congratulations, or I don't know exactly what it said, but congratulations, you are assigned to the 1st Marine Division, report to Camp Pendleton for advanced training, and I mean, it was a whole full letter, and, I'm in a state of shock. And my girlfriend had this big McCarthy flower on her trunk. So she wasn't, she wasn't a conservative, as you might imagine. And she said, you need to go to Canada. And I said, well, I can't do that. I signed a contract. I took the oath of office. And that's who I am. I can't go to Canada, So I went home and, told my folks I got orders to go to Vietnam. I don't know what they thought. And I don't know what I thought either. Had no idea. Just whether I was numb or just plain stupid. And so No, no, in the letter it said, send all your Navy uniforms home. You will be issued a full complement of Marine Corps uniforms. You know, welcome to the Marine Corps. It'll be a great thing for you. And they're talking all about how great it's going to be. And I don't know exactly what it said. I probably should have saved the letter, you know. So I reported to Camp Pendleton out in California and was issued my Marine Corps uniform. But your rank here is Navy. You have a Navy patch. But you do have a Marine Corps uniform. Nice looking uniform, you know. And you go through, since the Marine Corps is part of the Navy, you don't have to repeat the Navy part of what the Marine Corps boot camp is. You don't repeat that. You get the Marine Corps part that the Navy didn't get. And that is, you know, how to avoid booby traps, how to kill people, how to do all kinds of things that Marines are taught to do. So, anyway, they just said, you know, you're 1st Marine Division, and I said, well, what happens if I refuse my orders? They said, well, then you'll probably go to 3rd Marines. What happens if I refuse those? Well, they'd probably go to 5th Marines. I'm thinking, well, gee, I'm not going to get out of this deal, you know. So then we all got on a plane and went to Vietnam, and I remember landing on the, it doesn't dawn on you till you get there, really grab a hold of you. Landed on the airstrip, and there's holes in the airstrip from mortars and rockets. And I went, damn, I think I'm in the war now. This is not good. These people are serious, you know. So I remember walking into this building, and up on the wall were all these numbers and letters. And he says, and they always called you Doc. He says, well, which one of them do you want? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know what he's talking about. Which one do I want? You know. So he said, well, there's an opening at 3-5, there's an opening 1-3, an opening at 2-9. So I copped an attitude, and you're probably going to have to clean this one up. I said, send me the meanest motherfuckers you got. And he said, well, that's 3-5. That's where you're going. Helicopter's right out there. Just go on out there. They'll take you down to Anwa. I go, Anwa, I have no idea where it is, what it is, or anything. So I go down to Anwa. Well, first of all, I asked him if I could stay in Da Nang. That was before I, you know, said my little thing, you know, when I got mad. So I got down to Anwa, and I said, it was a regimental combat base. And they say, well, you're assigned to 3-5, and they told me where it was, and so, you know, I walked on over there. And so then you spend about 2 weeks becoming acclimatized to the heat. It's very hot and muggy there. There's only two climates, you know, hot and wet, hot and dry. You know, you go out on some convoy duty, you go out on some patrol duty, but they're just trying to get you acclimatized to the whole thing. And then they are indoctrinating you. And the indoctrination is very simple. Every person that, whether you know, they'd say things like, look, some of you may think you're non-combatants. You're not. You're a Marine. And your job, your primary job, is to kill the enemy. Every Marine is a rifleman first. Now, some of you have these other jobs like corpsman, machine gunner, mortarman, radioman, but everyone's a rifleman first and foremost. So that's your job. So if anybody has any problem with that, they need to speak up now. Well, you know, you're not going to say anything. So then I was, the first operation I went out on, I remember all the helicopters lined up on the helicopter pad, and I'm thinking to myself, man, you know, like there's 10 or 15 helicopters. I'm going, wow. You know, this is like on TV, you know, this is like in the movies and shit like that, you know, and you go, wow. And all these guys they got all their packs and their guns and all this stuff, and, you know, I'd been shot at before, and I'd shot back at the enemy, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't all these people getting ready to go out on a big operation. And the operation was Operation Taylor Common. And so we flew, I don't know how long we flew, 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And so then, you know, even though I had been in some very small firefights, I got the impression that this was a big deal, what we were going to be doing. And so you can't hear a damn thing in those helicopters, not a thing. And so people are starting to put their rounds in the chamber, and then you start hearing noises like clunk, clunk. And of course you can't hear anything. I go, what's the clunk? And the guy just kind of looked at me like I was an idiot. Well, what the clunk was that the enemy was shooting at the helicopter. Well, I didn't know that. And then they're putting rounds in the chamber. And I'm going, well, what's going on? Then the helicopter starts going around like this, starts circling. And I yell, what's going on? And the guy next to me says, hot LZ. And I'm thinking, the first thought I had was hot dogs. You know, I mean, you don't want to think about what they're talking about. Hot LZ. So, so then he yelled at me, lock and load. Okay, you know, whatever you say, man, that's what I'm going to do. And then he yelled at me and he said, when we hit the ground, run like hell. Okay, you know, so two helicopters landed at the same time. They landed in a little valley that was surrounded by hills, and the enemy was all up at the top of the hills. And so when we landed, on the other helicopter, that corpsman got hit. And he got hit as soon as he stepped off the helicopter. He got shot in the leg. And of course, the helicopter is not going to wait very long. So I ran over and threw a tourniquet on his leg because that was the fastest thing you could do. And he looked up at me and he said, it was a great quote for a book. I've only been in this fucking war 15 minutes and I'm going home. Never forget that. So I threw him back on the helicopter and, you know, well, helped put him back on the helicopter. And then some guys started yelling at me because there's these, you know, you could see the bullets zinging around you, you know. And you're going, well, you know, I need to get the hell out of here. You know, this is not a cool place to be. So we ran over to kind of a little ditch place, and some of the other guys were over there. And then we started returning fire. And then the captain came over and said, you know, we're supposed to go somewhere. I don't know. So we started moving out. And so now I'm out there. And there's no trains, there's no planes, there's nobody to take you home, and there's no way to get there either. So you say to yourself, 365 days, we used to call it 365 days in a wake-up. In other words, in 365 days, I'll be here 1 year, and then maybe I'll wake up, because the rest of the time I'll just kind of be asleep. It's kind of a joke, like you're numb. Just be numb. You'll be okay. So that was the biggest operation I went out on, and the purpose of the operation, well, as I understood it, was to get rid of the enemy that were out in the mountains, because we were out in the mountains. So that was the first time that I saw an NVA soldier up close, and I saw 5 of them. They were all dying. One of them was still alive. The lieutenant told me to shoot him, and I gave him a shot of morphine. Then the lieutenant shot him. So, just a little violation of the Geneva Convention. He was going to die anyway, but I just gave him a shot of morphine. I figured that kind of helped him go away a few hours earlier, you know. But it was really something to see an NVA soldier laying there and dying, because then it's like, it's much akin to you're walking down the street and you see somebody in a wheelchair and you get a little nervous. Well, the reason you're nervous is because there but for the grace of God go I. You know? And so it's the same thing when you see this NVA soldier there dying. You're going, there but for the grace of, that's me. I could be laying there, and the NVA people are walking past and looking at me, you know. So we got up, I don't know, probably about 30 or 40 yards from the top of the hill, and that's when they opened up on us, and that was the first real heavy-duty firefight I was in. Yeah.
So you felt compassion for the NVA when they were wounded? You didn't see them as evil?
Compassion. I don't think that's the right word. No. It was just some guy dying. He's the enemy. But to shoot him, no. I'd give him a shot of morphine. But the lieutenant, he was upset with me because I was going to use up some of my morphine on the guy, as if I couldn't get any more. You know. If that's compassion, yeah. But I wouldn't use that word. He's just another human being. He was going to die anyway. He was an enemy. If he was alive and he was 30 yards away, I'd shoot him. So I hope you can understand that that seems like very conflicting, doesn't it? Yeah. That's Vietnam. Very conflicting.
Your training, you described it as being very clueless. You went from one stage to the next, not really knowing what to expect. When you came out of your training and you landed in Vietnam, did you feel at all prepared, or was it just learning on the go?
Well, I worked in surgical wards, so I learned. I worked for a very good doctor that, and I worked night shift. So I was responsible for 30 patients just by myself. And so I learned a lot about medical treatment, emergency medical treatment there. And then when I worked in psych units, you know, there were some folks there that had some problems, physical problems. And then when we went through field med training, I learned a lot about emergency medicine there too. But a lot of the training was, you're a rifleman first, you kill the enemy. I guess after you shoot him, you go treat him, you know. That seems rather conflicting, doesn't it? Yeah.
Did you feel prepared for combat? It sounds like you were prepared for the medical aspects of your job, but
I thought I was prepared for the medical aspects until I had to do a few things. As far as the other, I was raised with guns, so guns were not a big deal to me, and I'd shot a lot of guns, so I understood that. I don't think I had any. I knew that there were some guys that I was with, some of the Marines that I was with, didn't know much about guns or how to shoot them, what to do, you know. So I really I think a person needs to get it in their mind that if you see the enemy, that's a target. It's not a human being. And if you can do that, you'll be okay. Some folks had problems with that. I didn't have a problem with it.
what happened to those folks?
Well, they were reluctant to shoot. I remember one time we had a guy who said his gun jammed. Yeah, right. That's why he didn't give us cover fire. I had one corpsman who tried to. He refused to carry a gun. He was with me for 2 days, and he says, "I'm not going to carry a gun." And something about the Geneva Convention says that we're non-combatants and blah blah blah. And I said, you know, that's not going to work with me. So, you know, you're either going to be a Marine corpsman or you're going to be transferred. And he said, well, I'm a non-combatant. Okay, you're transferred. So I transferred him. Now, of course, what that meant was I had one less corpsman. I was the senior corpsman by then. Well, I didn't tell you about that. I was assigned to a platoon, which was like about 40 people, 40 guys, when I was assigned to India Company. And when we were going up Hill 235, the hill that I was telling you about before, where that was the biggest firefight that I'd been in, this senior corpsman, apparently somewhere where he was, had walked into a house, a hooch, and hit a tripwire. He got killed. And so by this time, I was an E5, like a sergeant. So since I was a sergeant and an E5, I became a senior corpsman. So backing up, transferring Ballard, yeah, I could transfer him, but then that meant I had one less corpsman. And a Marine company is supposed to have 8 corpsmen. I never had 8 corpsmen. 5. So you had to make a decision about who was going to be assigned where. So my job was I was supposed to walk close to the captain, the company commander, the radio man. I had the FO, the forward observer, the guy who would call in artillery, but he'd also call in the medevac choppers too for me. And so that's who I was supposed to be with as senior corpsman. Well, the company commander was, he was really into the war. He was into it. He was getting into killing the enemy and all that stuff. You know, into this domino theory and communism and all that stuff. And so, you know, kill a commie for Christ kind of thing, you know. And so I kind of hooked up with the mortar platoon and spent some time with them. So that freed me up to assign enough corpsmen to the rifle platoons, because there were 3 of those, 3 rifle platoons, 1 mortar platoon, and then of course the captain and radio men, that sort of thing. So anytime those guys went out on a night ambush, they'd always have 2 corpsmen. So that meant back in the CP, the command post, we had less there. So if you got 6 corpsmen, you were lucky. Usually it didn't last long because certain occupations didn't have a long life, and one of them was a corpsman, because we had a $1,500 piastra bounty on us. So you kill a corpsman, you get 1,500 piastras. An officer, a radio man, boy, they're a good target, you know. So if the MVA would kill one of these folks, then they'd get a reward for that. So, and then a corpsman, of course, you know, when firefights are going on, you try to get as close to the ground as you can before you return fire. But when somebody gets hurt, you move from your primary job as a rifleman to your other job of corpsman, and your job is to just go over and help that guy. So, you know, as you're moving over there, you expose yourself to fire. So, like I said, we were supposed to have 8, but you never had 8. 5.
Do you have anything that marked you as a corpsman? Do you have a red cross on your helmet?
No. I had, and they're very dark. They're like a black color, caduceus here, and then I wore Marine Corps sergeant stripes here. But what would identify you as a corpsman is if they saw that you had a Unit 1 kit, a medical kit, and then corpsmen almost always carried more canteens than other people did, because when you would come to somebody who was hurt, you'd give them water. So I used to carry 5, 6 canteens. Then you would also carry a bottle of plasma, a bottle of D5W, medical stuff. So if the enemy could see these things that you were carrying, like a radioman, then that's who they would try to target in on. Yeah. It's much akin to if they could figure out who the company commander was. So, for an example, if you're in a war zone, I always like this when you see people on TV. It's such a joke because it would never happen. You're in a war zone, and you salute somebody. You don't ever do that. Anybody that salutes somebody, then the enemy knows, hey, this other guy, he is like maybe in charge, so let's shoot him, you know. So no, you never saluted anybody. And there were certain things that would identify certain people. if they could see it. So you take out a corpsman, and Marines would get very nervous and anxious when a corpsman was taken out, because then they'd say, well, who's going to take care of me if I get hit? You know, so. And then, of course, you know, when you weren't in firefights, Marines would also wonder, well, who's going to, you know, give me my salt tabs? Who's going to give me my tabs for my water to clean up the water? Who's going to get, you know, who's going to do these things that corpsmen do when we're not in firefights? Well, that guy got shot. He's gone. So it helps them feel nervous and anxious, and you don't want that when you're in a war zone. You want somebody that's focused on the job at hand.
Were there tactics employed to protect you?
To protect us.
A corpsman specifically, because of your the duties that you had, the importance.
Other than, you know, the guys that you ran with, you know, they'd say, hey, we'll give you cover fire so you can get over there. Yeah. And you had to wear a helmet in Anwa if you went downtown, what we call downtown. At the battalion aid station, you didn't have to wear a helmet. So when I was out in the field, I never wore a helmet. I wore a jungle hat. And I never wore a flat jacket unless I was in Anwa and going downtown. Never wore a flat jacket. Takes too long to get them off. And the problem with a lot of guys who wore flat jackets is that they leave them open here. Well, if shrapnel hits you, it's going to hit your heart and you're going to die. So what was the sense of wearing them? So I never wore a flat jacket. And after I was in Vietnam for 2 weeks, when we were going up this one hill, there was this guy running across the top of the hill. He was running from right to left, and I saw him running from right to left, and I probably, the whole time I carried an M16, but I also carried 45, and, you know, I probably didn't go through 2 or 3 clips the whole time I was in Vietnam with the 45, because the enemy never got that close. But he was close enough, so I pulled my 45 out and shot about 3 or 4 rounds at him in the leg. Well, it turned out he was an MVA corpsman. So he didn't know much English, but we could kind of communicate with each other, you know. And so when he was taken and put on the helicopter, I kept his stuff because I thought these would be good war momental things. Now, some guys had other things, as you've probably been told, as war mementos that I think is rather sick, but he had certain things, but the most important thing he had was a North Vietnamese pack. And I didn't like the packs that were issued to us. So I wore an MVA pack the whole time I was in Vietnam. An MVA, you know, where you carry your stuff, because they were very functional. You know, we need to remember that the Vietnamese were guerrilla fighters. And they were excellent guerrilla fighters. So they had certain items that were valuable to you in terms of fighting a guerrilla war, and one of them was a pack. Of course, the other one was an AK-47. That thing could get just as dirty as could be in still fire. You take an M16, get it dirty, it won't fire. So.
Did your unit specifically have problems with the M16?
Some guys did. Yeah, I never did. Never cleaned my weapon, never dug a foxhole.
What happened to that corpsman?
The corpsman guy?
No,
He probably went up to POW camp up in Anwa and then probably got shipped somewhere else, be my guess. We had a POW camp in Anwa, where I was at. It was back by the battalion aid station, and that was kind of interesting to see a prisoner of war camp, you know. But where he went from there, I don't know. I have no idea. I assume a big POW camp somewhere.
Can you take us back to your first firefight? What was going
First
through your
firefight.
mind? Yeah, you had said that earlier before the Hill 235, which was your biggest firefight.
I think, but I don't recall for sure. But I think the first firefight was we were on a convoy from Anwar to Da Nang, and I was in a truck. Had all my gear on and everything, you know. And I think we were going up to get supplies or something, as I recall. And then all of a sudden you hear the sounds. And the most important sound you hear is crack, crack, crack. That's an AK-47. So you know, this is not good. And then you hear some mortars go off. And then you hear a couple booby traps go off. And all these sounds, anybody that was in Vietnam, that was in some combat, knows these sounds and knows the different sounds and generally knows the difference, like you would know the difference between an AK-47 and M16. Very different sounds. And so then the convoy stopped, and of course I went, oh shit, you know, like, don't stop, keep going. And so, you know, somebody started yelling, return fire, or something. And so you get out of the truck and, you know, I'm looking around going, where do we return fire to? I mean, there's nothing out there because they had dropped Agent Orange all over the place. And there's you know, about 200 or 300 yards that away, there's some trees, and I guess that's where they thought the enemy was. So, you know, we'd line up on them, and then somebody said, hey, Doc, come on over here. Some guy needs some help. And so I go over, and there's this 3 or 4 pieces of a human being. And I'm told the guy, I said, well, I can't do anything for him. He's dead. You know, and so I told a couple of Marines, I said, grab a bag and bag him up. And I told another guy, I said, see if you can find his dog tags. So, you know, we know who it is. And then somebody else says, somebody over here is hit. And so I went over there and took care of him. We were close enough to Da Nang, we didn't need to call in a medevac chopper. So when we got everything, you know, all cleaned up and everything, we just jumped back in the trucks, took off. How long did that last? 5 minutes maybe. The firefight lasted maybe 5 minutes. Yeah. Most firefights in Vietnam did not last very long at all. A firefight that 15, 30 minutes, maybe. Firefight lasted longer than that. Now you're getting real serious. Real serious. But 15, 30 minutes.
Was that the first dead soldier that you'd seen?
Yeah, that was the first dead U.S. soldier that I saw. Yeah.
Do you remember any specific thoughts that you had at the time? Or
put him in a bag. It's not to be insensitive. It's just simply, I have a job to do, and I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to get it done. And you have to, if you're going to survive, if you're going to make it, you have to do certain things. And that's when I put him in a bag. Now, sometimes you'd see some of the Marines, they'd puke, you know, from being excited or seeing stuff or seeing a leg blown off or what, but you had to really crush your feelings in order to do things you needed to do.
You go ahead. I guess we're back on, and
sure.
Actually, I'd like tape 2 with Dr. James Hendricks. That's Chris Atkinson still. That's 11/24/09. We were just talking about memory off camera, and I'm actually interested. When did you start talking about Vietnam? You talked about. Can you tell that again?
Well, I didn't know. I remember Tony Edmonds, who is a professor here at Ball State, teaches a class on Vietnam, and I remember him asking me to come to his class and talk about it. And then I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, a guy said, hey, I was in Tony Edmonds' class in 1988, and you came in and talked about Vietnam. And he said it was the first time you'd ever done it. And I said, oh, okay, wow, I didn't know that, you know. So then I thought it'd be very interesting, because I remember, like in the early 80s, the VA put out this pamphlet, and it talked about here are the symptoms of the post-Vietnam stress syndrome. And I looked at the pamphlet and I said, well, fuck, I got all those. Wow, that's not cool. Then you lay the pamphlet down and you move on, you know. So I thought to myself, after this guy said this, and I've been going to Tony Edmonds' class, talking to Jerry Waite, and I wonder when I started talking about Vietnam, because I don't remember talking about it. I remember one time in 77, 78, I got on an elevator at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, where I went to school. And when I got on the elevator, I automatically knew that the guy standing next to me was a combat Vietnam vet. I could tell that right away. There's this feeling you get. And then this Asian American got on the elevator too. And I mean to tell you, buddy, when those doors closed, it got really scary in there for me, because I knew this combat Vietnam vet, he was not feeling good. And so when the Asian American walked off the elevator at floor 2 or 3, we were going up to 4, and the door shut, he just turned to me and he says, "Fucking gook." And I'm just going, wow, man, you know, I don't need this. So then we, you know, got off the elevator. And so I asked my brother-in-law, I said, did I talk about Vietnam in the 70s? Nope. Did I talk about it in the 80s? He said, you started talking about Vietnam a little bit in the mid-80s. So it was like, you know, 16 years before I even talked to anybody about it. My sister, who is in the helping professions, has asked me twice in the past 5 years, do you think Vietnam had any effect on you? That's great, man. I love that one. You know, like, well, let me see. I have night sweats, night terrors, nightmares. You know, I've got all the symptoms. What Vietnam did do for me, though, is this. I used to hunt every day, when I was a kid. And when I came back from Vietnam, I haven't hunted since. I don't go hunting. I don't really care to go fishing either. If I fish, I just throw it back in. I guess you might say I kind of moved from here to like a pacifist, you know, like, now, if you want to hunt, that's okay. I don't care. I don't have anything in it. I remember one time I went to this guy's house, and he had all these deer heads mounted and foxes mounted and all that stuff, you know. And I said, this was like, probably about mid-80s. And all I could say was, it was pretty offensive, really. I said, have you ever seen the movie Planet of the Apes? and he said, no, I've never seen it. I said, well, you might want to watch it. It's a really good movie. He said, well, what's it about? I said, oh, I wouldn't want to give the storyline away. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope I never see this guy again, because he's not going to like what I just told him. Because Planet of the Apes, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, it's kind of like, what is this about? Well, I used to do that. I used to shoot and hunt, you know. But since Vietnam, no, I don't care to shoot anything. Why would I do that? Once you have been in a war, I would think that you would understand what happened, and that all living things deserve to live. I was talking with another combat Vietnam vet yesterday, and you know, we were talking about the war and all this and that, and he's very much, you know, was against the war. And I've asked him several questions about a lot of things, you know, and many times when I encounter combat Vietnam veterans, if I feel like they're willing to talk to me about it, I will ask them questions. And the first question I ask him is, welcome home. Do you think, well, my sister, you know, asked me if Vietnam had an effect on me. Yeah. And you're in the helping professions. That's amazing. Well, I would, you know, welcome home, appreciate your service, and that sort of thing. And they always appreciate you saying that. because we were not welcomed home. And then if I feel like they are willing to answer the question, I'll ask them, how are you doing? And sometimes I'll give you this funny look. And I said, do you have problems? And sometimes, I saw a guy the other day at a craft show, and I said, do you have night sweats and night terrors and nightmares? And his wife interrupted us. She didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want him to talk about it. But I'll almost guarantee you, if he saw some heavy combat, I'll guarantee he's got it. And those night sweats can be really bad. My wife and I joke about it. You know, like, I had a night sweat last night. I had to get up. Must have had a Pacific. See, the Pacific's a big ocean, so that means that when I woke up, the bed was soaked. Now, an Atlantic is, I might get back to sleep, but probably not. And then that's not as much sweat. But yeah, you get night sweats, night terrors, nightmares.
Are you willing to describe some of the things? So what images come to mind in your night terrors and nightmares?
They used to be, when I was younger, they used to be much more vivid. And, you know, you recall certain events, you know, but, you know, sometimes like Hill 235, where we lost a lot of guys. Sometimes I'll recall shooting at some Viet Cong. That'll come back into my mind. Shooting that corpsman, that'll come in my mind. But in the past few years, those thoughts, when I wake up, it seems like I don't remember it, you know. So I just know that I had a nightmare. I know that. That's what the sweat's all about. And when I was younger, the night sweats were very smelly. Very smelly. I remember rooming with another Vietnam veteran, and man, if you opened up his door, man, that room smelled horrible because he had real bad night sweats. Yeah.
Do you remember anything about Vietnam specifically, the jungles or the smell in there, the feel, the texture, what that was like? Can you explain what it was like
to be up in the jungles?
Jungle combat, yeah.
Well, the jungles, Vietnam is a beautiful country if you get away from where the war was. If you get up in the mountains, it's beautiful up in there. Magnificent, but very dangerous place because, you know, you can't see the enemy. And, you know, you're walking down these trails and it's their country. They know what's going on. But it was beautiful up there. And then when you went down into the lowlands, where the rice paddies were and that sort of thing, there really wasn't much foliage down there because of Agent Orange. There's a lot of Agent Orange in Vietnam. A lot of Agent Orange. Many combat vets are what are referred to as walking time bombs. They're probably not going to live very long because of Agent Orange.
Do you feel that you've had any effects from being around Agent Orange?
Well, sure. I had a heavy exposure to it. Yeah, I used to see the big cans. Well, I saw the big cans and went, oh, there's the big cans over there, you know, whatever. And then when I had symptoms of Agent Orange and went up to Da Nang and was treated for it, we were told, well, what you have is jungle acne. It's because that you don't get a bath and you get dirty and all this and that, you get jungle acne. It wasn't jungle acne, it was Agent Orange. But I don't know if they knew that. Maybe they didn't either, you know. And then all that jungle acne lasted for probably about 15 years. Yeah. It looks like pimples, but it's very different, you know, because blood comes out. Yeah.
You mentioned the great beauty of the country. Is that part of the contradiction amidst...
There are many contradictions. many contradictions. You know, being in a war, and then, you know, you get on a plane and all of a sudden, like in, you know, I remember getting on the plane and leaving Vietnam, and I looked in the window, and look back and see, I had less than 90 days left in the military. So if you had less than 90 days left in the military when your tour of duty was over with, you got cut loose. You got out of the military, which was good. So I knew when I was going back to the States, I didn't have to do any stateside duty, which would have been hard for me because I was used to the jungle hat, jungle utilities. I wore Ho Chi Minh sandals. You know, that's all I wore. And so when I got on the plane, I looked back and I remember I had two thoughts, this conflicting thing again. One thought was, I am very much needed there. I can do some good there. I can help some people out there. I need to be where I was. And then the other thought was, I need to go home. I need to get out of here. And of course, you know, before you leave Vietnam, you were made several offers to stay. Oh yeah, money, money, money. And so you could stay, you know, and I think I'll go home. So when I got back to the States, I went to El Toro Marine Corps Base. That's where the plane landed and was, quote, separated from the Marine Corps. And then I went up, got on a bus. All the corpsmen got on the bus. The Marines stayed there. All the corpsmen got on the bus and went up to Long Beach and got out of the Navy. And, like, walked out the gate and I guess got a bus or something to the airport and waiting for the plane. And, you know, about 6 hours later, you think to yourself, now let me see here now. Took about, 20 hours for the plane to go from Da Nang to here. I was in Long Beach for about 3 days, and then, in 5 days you're home. And there's nothing happening, you understand. There's nobody sitting down saying, how you doing? Do you think you're messed up? They're not doing any of that stuff. And, you just go home and then say, well, let's see here now. Guess I better go get a job. It's just, there's nothing going on other than that. It's not like now, where all these people are going through this transition and seeing a counselor and all that stuff. None of that stuff happened. And so you didn't talk about it. And so I didn't talk about it for a long time. And I suspect most combat Vietnam vets don't talk about it, didn't talk about it. Some of them still won't talk about it. They certainly won't talk to you about it. They might talk to me about it. Might. And how much will they talk to me about it? Some of them won't talk very much at all. Yeah. Because I'd like to learn more, about, there were a lot of different wars in Vietnam. Like a friend of mine was on one of them little boats down south. Other people were with other branches of the military and did different things. Or it'd just be really interesting for me to find out what they did and what was everyday life like, And so, anyway, I'm sorry. I'm rambling.
No, it's great. What was your reception like? Do you remember, for instance, war protests were going strong in 1970, right, when you got out?
In the spring of 1970 at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, they set fire to the ROTC building.
How did that make you feel?
Well, I just wondered, well, gee, what'd they do that for, And then that fall is when I went back to school, because I got back from Vietnam in January of 70, and then went back to work in the factories, because I had to give you your job back. And then that fall I went to school at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. And I remember, you think to yourself, how were certain decisions made? And I hooked up with another combat Vietnam veteran, and him and I rented a trailer 15 miles out of town. Looking back at it now, that was an unconscious decision to get away from people. But at the time, I thought it was a conscious decision to rent something at a good price, and but no, it was a decision to get away from people. You didn't want to be around people. So, And the protests and all that, and what people said, hey, you know, I don't want to hear any of that stuff. I got other things to do. I got a life to lead, and I want to do well in school, and you know, that's all I cared about. Pretty much all I cared about was where am I going to find something to eat, some alcohol to drink, some marijuana to smoke, and find some woman for companionship. And I think that's a nice way to put it. And that's pretty much in school, and that's pretty much all that I cared about. So, you know, I went to school in the morning, studied in the afternoon, and by 4 o'clock is when the alcohol and the marijuana came out. I did that for several years, every day, till I got in grad school. And then grad school is a lot different than undergraduate school. You can't go to class and kind of be in a fog, you know. It doesn't work out very well. And so, especially if you're in a counseling program. And that's, you know, when I finished my undergraduate degree in psych, I started a master's degree in counseling, and I imagine they probably wouldn't appreciate me smoking marijuana every day and going to class. Probably not a good idea. And, you know, looking back on it, again, I thought that was a conscious decision to smoke marijuana, to have fun and enjoy it. But now I realize that was a way for me to kill the pain. That was a way for me to be in the ozone, you know, to kill the pain of Vietnam. But I didn't know that at the time.
Did you pick that habit up in Vietnam?
I smoked dope in Vietnam a few times before I left Vietnam. Yeah. Yeah.
Was that a pretty widespread
oh yeah,
problem?
Sure. Either alcohol or marijuana, one or the other.
What was most destructive?
Well, I don't know. Some guys did some other things, but the guys who would drink, they'd get you know, angry and mad and all that sort of things. The guys smoking marijuana, they just kind of hanging out. So, and the marijuana in Vietnam was very, very strong. Very strong. As compared to here. Yeah.
Did you you mentioned your your girlfriend before you left being kind of an anti-war.
Oh yeah.
Do you keep in touch with her at all?
Well, no. She came to see me one time, and I realized how nutty she was. But before Vietnam, I didn't think she was nutty. But when I got back from Vietnam, I determined that woman was pretty nutty. And I think that's one of the things Vietnam did for me was really wake me up. I think I was asleep. It woke me up. Like, hey, wake up. This is serious shit. Now, when you get back to the States, you need to get your life together. And so I would have never, ever imagined I was going to be a college professor or get a college degree or get a PhD. Oh, come on. That, you know, just get a degree would be amazing, you know. So, as I mentioned before, I flunked out of college. So my last year in college, I had to get straight A's in order to have a high enough grade point to apply for probation for grad school. And I was fortunate to get in. Straight A's. My last year. And you're going to think to yourself, how did I do that? You know? Well, Vietnam certainly will do it for you because it wakes you up to what is important to you. What do you want to do? You know, you see these guys, you know, who died and everything. They can't do anything now. That's really sad. So, but you have an opportunity, so take advantage of it. So, I'm sorry, I'm rambling again.
Earlier, also, you mentioned the domino theory.
Oh yeah, that was all part of you know, the conservative thinking. You know, if Vietnam falls, then Cambodia is going to fall, and this country is going to fall, and all these countries are going to fall, and they're going to be under communist domination, and that's why we got to win this war in Vietnam to stop the domino theory.
Did you buy into it then?
I just thought, well, you know, it sounds logical, but whatever. I mean, that's for politicians to worry about, not for little me, you know. That was talked about a lot, the domino theory.
What are your thoughts on it now?
That's all bullshit. We're doing the same thing over in, I think back to the 70s when Iran was our buddy, then all of a sudden after 2 or 3 years, Iraq was our buddy and Iran was our enemy. And I'm just, can't you guys make up your mind who's our friend and who's not? And then I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, you know about Afghanistan, right? We're in Afghanistan. It's pretty bad there now. And I said, yeah. I said, well, do you know who helped create Al-Qaeda? Well, we don't know. I said, well, I can tell you who helped create Al-Qaeda, the United States of America. Oh, no, that can't be true. I said, well, do you remember when the Russians invaded Afghanistan? Yeah, kind of. Well, the Russians invaded Afghanistan, so the United States went in because we didn't like the Russians, see? That was our enemy. So we went in and supported the Afghans. And we supported these rebels who fought against the Russians. And these rebels became Al-Qaeda. The Taliban. That's who they became. So that's who helped create them. Now we're going back in against these people. A story I often tell is this one. It's like this. There was this largest army in the world. They had all the supplies and equipment and guns, and they had everything. And they decided that their colonies were running amok and they needed to do something about it. So they took the largest army in the world, largest fighting force in the world, England, and they came to this where the colonies were, what is later became the United States of America. And so these colonists said, hey, we don't like this, and so we're going to fight against these people. So we had this ragtag rebel army fighting the largest fighting force in the world, and golly, what happened? Well, these ragtag guys kicked their ass and sent them packing to England. 200 years later, the largest fighting force in the world goes to a place called Vietnam. And guess what happened? They sent us packing. Never lost a major... The United States never lost a battle in Vietnam. But we did lose the war here at home. Because when those body bags kept coming back here to the United States people here said, hey man, that's it for us. We need to get out of there. And I don't know how we're going to get out of Iran and Afghanistan. I don't know. But anyway, I think that's an interesting analogy, isn't it? Like, think about it, So.
When you were a young kid in Vietnam, did you sense the lack of support at home, or were you too removed from it?
Well, first of all, I wasn't a young kid in Vietnam. I was an old man in Vietnam. And an old man in Vietnam is somebody who turned 25 in Vietnam. Most people were like 19. So I think that was helpful to me in terms of what you and I have talked about. That, I knew what I needed to do and that sort of thing. But the lack of support back home, well, in 68, 69 is when the country, as far as I can tell, started turning against the war. And that's because there were so many body bags coming home. That's one of the reasons. And so, yeah, we heard about that the United States was, against the war. And of course, Nixon said he was going to get us out. And then we heard about certain units starting to be going to be pulling out within a year or two. So we knew there was probably an end in sight for the war because units were being pulled out. And so, but that was after I left Vietnam. So.
Did you arrive in country right after the Tet Offensive? Or right
I arrived just before Tet of '69. There was the Tet Offensive every year, and An Hoa took in more rockets in one day than any other combat base did the whole war. That was Tet of '69. But everybody focuses on Tet of 68.
Do you think that was a major turning point, or was that a media creation?
Tet of 68? Oh, that was definitely a turning point, of course, yeah. Yeah.
Can you describe the Tet of 69? What's it feel like to be under a rocket attack?
Well, Tet of 69, I mean, this was, the North Vietnamese way of, getting a lot of publicity, doing a lot of damage. You always knew that something that was going to be going on around that time. And so when they started blowing the rockets in and they just kept it up, that was a lot. And then they came in and blew up the ammo dump. Five NVA sappers. An NVA sapper is a person who trains for a long period of time for one mission. They're probably going to die. They're like kamikaze pilots. And these 5 got through the concertina wire, they got through the whole 9 yards, and they went in and blew up the ammo dump. All ammunition that we had stored inside a regimental combat base got blown up. That all happened Tet of 69. So those things were a big deal to us, that they could do these things. It's pretty scary.
When you came home and you were able to read newspapers and watch the news, how was Vietnam covered? Did you feel it was a fair portrayal?
Didn't think much about it.
Did you not really watch the news, or?
Didn't think much about it. I don't recall talking to anybody about it. There was one, John Beasley. I saw him in a bar right after Vietnam, and went down and saw him, and I said, "Hey, John, what's up?" And he said, "Oh, I just got back from Vietnam." I said, "Oh, so did I." I said, "What'd you do in Vietnam?" He said, "I was a sniper." I said, "Wow." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Did you carry 707? "Yeah." He says, "That's right. You must have been with the Marine Corps." I said, "Yeah, I was corpsman with them." "Oh, you were corpsman? Oh, wow, 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 wow." Corpsmen are loved by Marines, just loved. And I said, "How many confirmed kills you got?" He said, 26. Next question was, "Do you have nightmares?" "Yeah." And his nightmares were this: crosshairs with a head. And I'm thinking to myself, no, thank you, I don't want that one. I'll take what I got. That's pretty scary. But the newspaper, the watching TV and all, I just wasn't into it. I really, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to think about it. You'd run into Vietnam vets, but of course you'd also run into like the guy that was on the elevator, the racist guy. I don't want to be around those people. Those people are not healthy for me. I want to be around people that want to enjoy life, want to be productive, want to, go to school, do well. That's what I wanted. So I really didn't care much about all that.
How did you feel about the Vietnamese people when you were there?
Well, again, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and I said, we'd come up to a village, and I can remember, coming up to some villages, and if we got fired on, we just would call in artillery and just blow the shit out of it. If we came up to a village and there was no fire return, we'd go into the village, help them dig wells, take care of their medical needs, give them food, be friendly with them, play with the kids, that sort of thing. But you could also, this sounds really crazy, you could also do all that and then leave the village, get maybe 500 yards away, and then they open fire on you, and then just call in an artillery and just blow the shit out of it. This is crazy. It's very, there are many things that happen in war that are just insane. Insane. It's much akin to this one friend of mine. He was a psychologist in Vietnam, and he says, have a guy come in and he says, "Hey, I don't want to be here in Vietnam because, see, there's bad stuff going on here." And a psychologist would say, "Well, that means that you're sane, so, you don't need, that's it. Just go back to your unit." Another guy'd come in and he'd say, "Hey, man, I'm really into this war and I want to kill people." He said, "Good. Just go back to your unit. You're okay, too." So you see, everybody was okay. He said it was like out of a movie, you know. And I said, yeah, no kidding. It's crazy, isn't it? So, and he works here too, by the way.
What do you think of some of the movies about Vietnam? Are they?
Well, you know, a couple. Platoon is a very, for me, the end of the movie is very emotional. And what Charlie Sheen says at the end of the movie about the war is over for me now, but it will be with me for the rest of my days. That's very emotional. I think there were some things in that movie that seemed fairly accurate. But you know, in Forrest Gump, when Forrest Gump and the guys got up to this road and they got shot at, and the firefight lasted, what, 3 minutes or something? I thought, wow, man, that looks pretty realistic. You know, they shot at them, it's over in 3 minutes. I'm not talking about him carrying people back and all that, just that one little segment, you know. And then I remember another movie where some people were walking across a river or something, some movie, and I don't know, the firefight lasted 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm going, wow, man, that looks pretty realistic. You know, those sorts of things, as opposed to John Wayne standing up and, you know, shooting at people. I'm thinking, boy, you're going to die, son. You know, some of the other movies, like Full Metal Jacket, there's a few scenes in there that I think are pretty good, but Apocalypse Now, that's 100% total bullshit. Robert Duvall in that one movie, of course, that was Army, but what did he say? He says, there's nothing better than the smell of napalm and something else in the morning. I go, wow, no kidding. You know, the smells, you know. And napalm and burning flesh or something, he'd said. You know, he's totally insane, but so real, too. You know, so... Yeah, in movies. Again, the end of the movie Platoon, where Charlie Sheen's in the helicopter, that's very emotional for me. What he says, you know, that we need to tell people about what happened here, so that they learn from this. And of course, that won the Academy Award for what, 1986? Yeah, good movie.
Those are really all the questions that I have prepared in my mind, at least today. But I'd like to give you the opportunity at this point to touch on anything that we haven't touched upon, or something that you'd like to elaborate on that we spoke about earlier. Is there anything that comes up?
Not anything I can think of. I don't know what it would be.
Well, on behalf of myself then and Dr. Doyle and the Vietnam Era Oral History Project, I want to thank you very much for